measured it yesterday, I said 240.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon. We're so glad you all came out, and now that we're having some nice weather. Still never know if winter's gone or summer's here. It's kind of been back and forth so much. The Herrin Area Historical Society welcomes you. We'd like to remind you that we have memberships that are $25 a year, and with that you get the monthly newsletter, and each newsletter is always stories about old Herrin history that we dig out of the old newspapers and files and things around. Also, I'd like to remind you all that we film the historical lectures now, and those are slowly going up onto YouTube, where you'll be able to see them, and the best way to find out about that is to call the library and check and see. They can also be checked out during interlibrary loan. I'd like to recognize the board members that are here. We have several, and just raise your hand. There's Gordon and Becky and Marilyn and Don and Carl and Cookie and Vicky, and that helps everybody raising their hands, because I always go over somebody's Linda. And anyway, at this time, I'm going to have Gordon Pruitt come up and introduce our guests.
Today's guest, Glenn Poshard, needs little introduction, so this will be brief. Arguably, he has the most familiar voice, the most recognizable face, and the most famous name in Southern Illinois. And his decades of public service are truly extraordinary. He's earned 3 degrees from SIU. Early in his career, he taught high school, coached high school sports, and served as director of the Southern Illinois Educational Service Center in Benton from 1975 to 82. He next served in the Illinois Senate, where he was instrumental in securing the funding that built the Herrin Civic Center. He was elected to Congress, the House of Representatives, where he served until 1999. Next, he sought the office of Illinois governor, but was narrowly defeated by George Ryan. Certainly, the course of Illinois history could have been much different if Glenn had been elected. And most recently, he has served as president of Southern Illinois University from 2006 until his retirement in 2014. He and his wife Jo founded the Poshard Foundation for Abused Children in 1999, which has raised more than $100,000 annually for the care of abused children and the victims of domestic abuse in Southern Illinois. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Poshard.
Thanks for the kind introduction. I have to tell you, it's such an honor to be here. I've been out of politics and stuff since 1999, because at the university I wasn't allowed to do anything political or whatever. So it's an honor to be here. I remember when I first decided to run for office, and I came to Herrin, and there were a few people that you had to meet with. First of all, you had to go to Mimi Gentile's basement. That's where Mimi took confession from all the Baptist boys. Okay, so Jimmy, you were probably there a few of those times.
I remember.
And then Francis Jeter would take me around and introduce me to all the ladies who still spoke Italian. Some of them at that time didn't even speak English. And I thought that was good. But I had such wonderful times here in Herrin. Go to Chevy's. Baptist boys didn't call it Chevy's Tavern, they called it Chevy's Lounge. It made it sound a little pretty good. But Eddie Quaglia and Mary Stampini, I mean, just different people over the years that you work with from the community. I just loved it. I got up this morning, I turned on CNN, and okay, this is what I heard. He's a liar. No, he's a liar. No, she's a bigger liar. No, that guy's a bigger liar. It was everybody's a liar. Well, now I'm here to tell you that politicians do not tell lies. The reason I know this is because my good old friend from West Frankfort, who represented this area in Congress for so many years, Ken Gray, told me a story once. Ken said he was down in Vienna and he was campaigning door to door. And he said, I walked into this yard, and he said there were about a dozen little boys sitting in the yard in a circle, and there was a dog in the middle of them. And I said to him, I said, boys, what are you doing here? And one of the little boys spoke up, and he said, well, we're telling lies. And the one that tells the biggest lie gets the dog. So Ken said, I told him, I said, well, now you boys ought not to be doing that. He said, you shouldn't be lying. You know that's wrong to lie. He said, well, when I was your age, I never told a lie. The little boy said, give him the dog. I got a lot of stories about Ken. I campaigned with him for so long over the years. Anyway, it is an honor to be here, and I wanted to start out by talking to you just a little bit about how I really got involved in politics. It was following my dad around through the precincts over in White County, where I grew up about 60 miles from here. My dad only had one arm, and he was disabled, and he just didn't like prejudice of any kind. And we went to a little country Baptist church, had maybe 50 people in it. And in August of 1960, I'd followed my dad around the precincts for years as a little boy. August of 1960, I was 15 years old. And there was an itinerant preacher. We had this habit of inviting visiting preachers in the area to come and speak to our little church. This guy got up and he said, if John Fitzgerald Kennedy is elected President of the United States, the Pope will rule America. And we were absolutely stunned. I mean, totally stunned, because we weren't used to hearing those kinds of things in our little church. It was all coal miners and small farmers and stuff, you know. We had friends that were Catholic and Baptist and Presbyterian and Methodist. I mean, so anyway, church got over. This guy never let up during his sermon. And standing on the porch of that little church out there in the country, after the service, I watched my dad in his Big Smith overalls and his Prince Albert tobacco in his front pocket. I watched my dad walk up to this guy and put his one arm on his shoulder. And he said, sir, you are never welcome in this church again, because we don't hear that here. You know, don't darken the door of our church anymore. Wow. I was standing from about here to you, Bob, watching my dad, and it was the greatest gift my father ever gave me. And I remembered it many times throughout my political career, because my dad didn't just talk about that, he walked the walk, you know, and I got to see him. And it stuck with me for so many years, because I think principle does matter when you're in government. Anyway, that was really my first introduction to politics and government that my dad gave me. I got out of high school. I graduated Carmike Township High School. I was only 16 years old when I graduated. I went to a 2-room country schoolhouse, and they had 4 grades in each room, and I was the only kid in the 5th grade, so they put me in the 6th grade. And back then, they didn't have kindergarten. I started school when I was 5 in the 1st grade. So I started high school when I was 12, and graduated when I was 16. On my 17th birthday, I signed up for the United States Army, which is what about every kid did where I grew up, because everybody was very poor. I got sent to Korea, and that was 10 years after the war. I was stationed with the 1st Cav Division up on the DMZ. And because I loved John Kennedy so much, because of my father, I would walk guard duty at night outside in the guarded area, and I would recite John Kennedy's speeches to myself. I memorized every major speech that John Kennedy gave. We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change. For I have sworn before you and Almighty God, the same solemn oath our forebears prescribed nearly a century and 3/4 ago. The world is very different now, but man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. We dare not forget today that we are the heirs of that first revolution. I love it gave my generation a passion for wanting to get involved. I remember driving into Herrin, and you all had a big sign out there on the edge of town with Kennedy's picture. It said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, rather ask what you can do for your country." Do you all remember that big sign? Yeah, it was really, to my generation, that was something else. Well, anyway, came home from Korea, started over to SIU on the GI Bill, became a Democrat precinct committeeman here in the county over in Carterville, started going to all the meetings, became vice chairman of our party here, and ran for the Senate against Senator Gene Johns and Ned Mitchell, the mayor of Cesar, and I came in second. I went out and helped Gene in the next election, and unfortunately Gene, who was a very good guy, passed away with cancer, and the county chairman appointed me to take his place. I went to the Illinois State Senate, and I can easily recall the first meeting I had with the Senate president, the 3 or 4 Democrats that had just gotten elected. President Rock said, "Now here's the most important thing you need to know. The most important thing you can do here is get back here. Whatever it takes for you to get reelected, if you need to go stand up and yell and scream against Chicago, and that'll help you back home, do it. Because you got to get back here." That's the important thing. Democrats had a 31 to 28 majority then, so it was razor thin. Well, that didn't sound right to me. I didn't think that I got elected to the Senate or appointed to the Senate in order to just cast votes that would make sure that I got back there. So I struggled with some of those issues. I was appointed, I think, the first downstater over the Labor and Commerce Committee. This was in, 1984. And just so happened that we were still reeling from the recession in the early 1980s that had taken place, and our committee had to rewrite the unemployment compensation bill for the state of Illinois and the workman's comp bills. Well, we did that over in the governor's mansion. That's where we met. And I'm sitting in the middle, and I've got the laborers and the carpenters and the electricians and all the labor unions on one side of the table, and I got the retail merchants and the Chamber of Commerce and the Illinois Manufacturers Society on the other side of the table, and you talking about a row. Now, we had a row because we were always, these two groups don't really like each other a whole lot, and we had to figure out a bill that somehow found a middle ground that was going to keep Illinois solvent and those funds solvent and satisfy both sides. It was one of the most difficult things that I was personally in charge of, but I look back on that time now and how invigorated I felt trying to get those two sides to agree with each other on anything. And it was fun doing it. Other things that I got involved in the Senate, well, the Build Illinois program, anybody remember that? That was a program that Governor James Thompson put forward, and it was a massive infrastructure rebuilding for the state of Illinois. My district, my Senate district, which was basically this area right in here, okay, my district had a need of so many things: sewer systems, water systems, roads, bridges, the kind of things that keep communities going. But we were poor, And I spent a great deal of my time negotiating with Governor Thompson on how much he could give me for my district if I voted for his tax increase. Okay? Now people today, they say, I'm not voting for a tax, no matter what tax, I'm not voting for it. Well, I never said that. I voted for several tax increases when I was in the state senate and Congress, and not a single one of those votes ever got me beat. Other things did, but not those votes. Because, you know, if you're not willing to pay for it, you've only got one alternative, and that's to borrow the money to do it. And I abhor borrowing and spending when you shouldn't have to. You put it on the backs of the children instead of taking responsibility for your generation to do what's needed now. So anyway, I had a good time with Governor Thompson in negotiating a lot of projects in that Build Illinois program for my community. One of the things that I remember was I was visiting the Golconda Senior Citizen Center, and the folks down there said, wow, I said, we got to have a new bus. This old bus we're riding in is just worn out. You know, it's falling apart. I said, will you get us a new bus? I said, well, geez, I don't know if I can. But I'll tell you what, I'll be back in a few weeks, and I'll take a ride with you on your bus, and we'll just see. So I went down, I ate lunch with them. We crawled on this old bus, and the bus drivers got her down in first gear. We're crawling up that big hill just as you come out of Golconda. That thing is shaking and rattling. And sitting right across the aisle from me, I'm about 4 rows back, is an elderly gentleman who began to tell me that he just had a birthday. In fact, he just had his 84th birthday. And he really loved the Senior Citizen Center. So I noticed the bus driver, she was looking up in her mirror and looking back at this gentleman telling me about his birthday, and there was this little white-haired lady sitting on the first seat right behind the bus driver. So I can't remember her name now, but anyway, the bus driver said, well, Senator Poshard, you know, Mr. Williams isn't the only person that's just had a birthday here. She said, Mrs. Brown, tell Senator Poshard how old you are and what you'll do for him in the next election if he gets us a new bus. So, it seemed like 10 years, but this little white head slowly turns around, and she's looking at me, and she says, well, Mr. Poshard, she said, I sure hope you can get us a bus. You can see how rickety this thing is. And she said, I have to come in from the country every day. I like visiting with my friends down there. But she said, I just had my 86th birthday, and I never voted for a Democrat in my life, and I ain't voting for you either. Well, principle matters, right? I mean, that's a lot better having somebody tell you the truth than it is kind of willow-wallowing around. I never forgot her. She and my dad were two of the most direct people I ever knew. Well, I was elected to Congress in 1988. First of all, I got to tell you about a bill in the state Senate that I just wanted to tell you about. When I was in the state Senate, the apartheid government in South Africa was just ruling over the majority population there. Everything that you can imagine anti-democratic. And one of the senators had a bill because we finally came to realize that the only way to break an unjust government like that was through economics. You can talk to them till they're blue in the face, you can try to get them to do the right thing, but if they're doing well economically, you may as well talk to a post. So there was a bill up that said all of Illinois, the state of Illinois' investments in companies that are doing business with the apartheid government in South Africa we're going to stop doing business with those companies. We're not going to invest Illinois taxpayers' money in companies that are holding up the apartheid government of South Africa. And the sponsor of the bill didn't even come and talk to those of us from Southern Illinois because he thought automatically we would be against his bill to disinvest our interest from companies doing business in South Africa. It got down to the final vote, and I felt compelled to stand up, and I cited Dr. Martin Luther King's letters from a Birmingham jail. When Dr. King said, "I know the laws of the state of Alabama say that I have to ride in the rear of public conveyance, that I can't eat in the public restaurant of my choice, and I can't send my children to the best public schools available, but there is a higher law that says I can do all of those things just by virtue of me being God's created being." And I cited that on the floor. And I got Senator O'Daniel to come across and vote with me, and we carried that bill by the thin of our teeth. And when I got back up to my office after the vote, I had a telegram that was sent to me by the Coalition for Illinois' Divestment from South African Companies, and it said, "Millions of people in Illinois and South Africa commend you for your strong anti-apartheid position. Thank you." That was my dad. That was going back to the porch on the church, you know. And there's some things that stick with you because you know you did the right thing. And maybe you carried the day for just a moment. That was important to me. Well, anyway, got elected to Congress. This is what I want you to understand, because I think this is really important. This is how you go to Congress. For a year before you are elected, the DCCC, if you're a Democrat, the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee, or if you're a Republican, the Republican National Campaign Committee, you come to Washington at least once a month for 3 days, and you start out at 6 o'clock in the morning and you go till 10 o'clock at night. Every hour on the hour, you're meeting with a PAC, a Political Action Committee. And these are committees that represent huge numbers of people. Maybe a committee representing the laborers, next hour the teachers, next hour the Chamber of Commerce. They all represent millions of people. And they're going to determine whether they will support you in your district. And you got to sit down and you got to do an interview across the table from their committee. And then they give you a sheet. And on many of these occasions, the sheet would read something like, well, House Bill 2030 that's going to be coming up in this session deals with so-and-so and so-and-so. How will you vote on this? I'm going, wait a minute. I don't want to commit myself. Well, if you don't want to commit yourself, you know, we're not going to support somebody who's not going to support our agenda. So you find yourself in a pickle. If you want their money, if you want all the people back in your district that they're going to send a letter to with their endorsement of you, you better come across with what they need. That's the pressure you're under. I don't care who it is. It's the way the system operates. And I went through a whole year of that routine and never felt good about it. Then I get in Congress and I'm assigned a committee. I can't even remember what the particular issue was now. But I was assigned a committee, and one of the issues about which I had signed the paper and given my consent to support came up in our committee. And I'm listening now, not to the PAC, but I'm listening to people from Oregon and Michigan and Missouri and Florida and all over the country come in and talk about this issue. All of a sudden, I find my mind starting to change. I don't feel like I'm where I was when I told them I would do this, because now I'm hearing from everybody that's affected by it, one way or the other. And I remember the day that the vote came up on the floor. Dave Strickland can attest to this, my chief of staff. I told all my kids, I said, I want you to lock the door. I'm going to sit here, I'm going to watch the final 3 hours of debate, because I don't know what I'm going to do on this yet. I gave my word to support it. But I don't feel like it's the right thing now. And I want to see if this final debate is going to change my mind. So I didn't take a call, I didn't see a person. I listened to every single last word of the debate. 1/4 mile from my office to the floor, and I had 15 minutes to get there. And I walked in there with about a minute left on the clock. I went to the voting machine and held my card, and 5 seconds to go on the vote. I voted just the way I told those people I would vote a year before, even though I knew in my gut it was the wrong thing to do. But I was a freshman, and you're never so vulnerable as you are when you're a freshman, and everybody's coming after you. The shame that washed over me was incredible, because usually you hang around after a vote and you talk to your colleagues on the back rail for a while, then you go back to your committees or your office. I went straight down the steps of the Capitol, walked over to my office. I could hear my dad's voice. And I walked in and I told Dave, I said, Dave, I want you to bring everybody in here, because I want to tell you something. All my staff came into the office, and I said to them that day, you know what? This is my first year here, but I'm never taking another penny of PAC money as long as I'm in government. Never. As long as I'm in government. That's it. I don't want to talk to any more PAC people. I don't want to solicit their support. I got to be able to make up my mind the way I feel is according to my conscience and my best judgment that I can bring to bear on the facts. And from that day forward, we made a decision there. We never took another penny of PAC money. There were certain decisions that we made all together. And I thought I wrote these down. I did. No more PAC monies. We never sent out another free newsletter. I know you get newsletters from your congressman all the time. You know what those are? They're incumbent protection devices. Because each party has a sharp person come around, they sit down with you and your staff and they say, now, what are the good things that you did in your district? Okay? So all the things that you can think of that make you look good to the constituents in your district, they'll write an article up about it. And you'll have 4 to 6 pages full of good stuff you're sending out to your district to show what a great congressman you are. And it costs you tens of millions of dollars. And guess who doesn't have that ability? The person that's running against you. They don't have the incumbent protection devices. So we never sent another one. We turned back, at the end of my 10 years in Congress, we had turned back over $1 million in office expenses that we didn't have any need to spend, but you get right down to the last couple months, and they say, well, spend everything, you know, that you can spend, and it's a waste. We turned it back. We expressly had said when we ran for Congress that we believed in term limits, and I do. I always did. I believe that if you go back and read the Federalist Papers and other papers that our forefathers wrote that define what they meant by public service, you will find out that they meant for people to train themselves for a profession, to work in that profession, to leave it for a period of time, go serve in the national government, get out and go back to their profession. They didn't mean for people to be there 45, 50 years.
Right.
And we had a lot of people there that long.
Right.
So, so those are some decisions that we made, mainly based upon my experience with the money chase. And we limited all of our donations from that point forward to $200 or less. And so, you know, that was just things that we felt strongly about. Now, come 1990, I'm in Congress. I've only been there 2 years, and we have a new census. Illinois loses 2 congressional seats. So, what are you going to do now about this map, these congressional districts? Because here's the congressional district going from Centralia to Cairo to St. Clair County, okay? Across the river, this district ended right across the river from the Arch, okay? This was Ken Gray and Paul Simon's old district. But we lost 2 seats. We had an agreement to take 1 seat out of Chicago and 1 seat out of downstate. Well, this is what happened. This district, Jerry Costello ended up with a little slice down here that had all the people up here in the north end of the district in St. Clair, Monroe County. Okay? They cut the line. Here's where I live, right here. They cut the line 1 mile from my home. So I'm living down here, and if I want to keep my congressional seat, I got a decision to make. I got to run against Jerry over here, where he's got all the population in the north end of the district, and just a little slice, and I'm not even in this district anymore. Or I got to run in this district, and Terry Bruce sits right here and has represented everything in here all the way. This goes 40 miles north of Decatur. So I made the decision that I could not beat Jerry. There was no way I could win this district. And so I decided to run against Terry for this seat. Well, the only thing I had left in my district was about here and down. This seat goes all the way from Cairo and Metropolis to 40 miles north of Decatur. I'd never been in a lot of those counties. My son became my campaign manager. He camped out in Decatur. I would come home from Washington, get a hotel in Charleston or Mattoon or Effingham, wherever I was going to be working that week. And I'd like to kill this. I mean, that is a horrible district because you're on the road all the time, you know. But lo and behold, we won that race. And I don't know how yet, except the counties down here in my old district gave me nearly 90% of the vote. You know, this isn't a Democrat primary. And I had a lot of Republican friends that crossed over for me in that primary, and I know that, and I'm thankful for that too. But I represented this district for 6 years, from 1992 through 1998, and represented this district 4 years before the census changed everything. But that was a hard district for me. I was home on Sunday mornings. It was the only time I was ever home for 6 years. I would fly into St. Louis and go from there to some northern or central part of that district, spend all day Friday and Saturday working, meeting with constituents and so on, and come home Sunday morning. Joe and I and the kids would go to church, and then I would leave for the St. Louis airport to fly back out to Washington and be ready for Monday morning business. It was hard. It was hard. So anyway, that was part of what I did for all those years. Well, let me see if I can find the rest of my notes here. I'm trying to keep things progressively in order here. One of the things you hear about today, while we can agree that principle is a good thing, people have to stand on principle. Democracy was never meant to let the extremes rule. Democracy is the broad middle ground where 90% of Americans are. Sometimes government shifts a little bit right of center, sometimes it shifts a little bit left of center. But we've always been sure that democracy will stay healthy if it is middle ground. Today, everything is different. Today, the ultra-liberals run the Democrat Party, and the ultra-conservatives run the Republican Party. They get all the attention. They won't come to the middle on anything, neither side. And it's hurting us as a people terribly, because nobody gets it right 100% of the time. When Joe and I have an argument over something, we sit down at the kitchen table. We end up, she gets a little bit of what she wants, I get a little bit of what I want. Neither one of us get it all. But today, the parties are just being torn asunder by people who won't compromise on anything. And you can't do that. Democracy doesn't work that way. Major issues that I faced in Congress. When I was in Congress, Mrs. Clinton headed up for the president this initiative for a new health care bill. It was a comprehensive bill. Actually, there were many, many good parts to it. And I brought it home, and I went to every county in my district and tried to explain it to folks. But I knew it was dead before it ever hit the Hill. You know why it was dead? Because it was done behind closed doors with just the people that she wanted to have involved. That was it. There was no compromise. And when it came out, because people had been excluded rather than included, it was dead. On the other hand, I was there in 1994. Newt Gingrich came in with all of these young guys who absolutely knew what America needed. They wrote a contract for America. Do you remember it? And they guaranteed America 10 things in the contract. And I knew that wasn't going anywhere. Why? Same reason. They excluded everybody on our side of the aisle from having any input into the contract. And within a few months, the whole government was shut down. Well, you can't do that.
I remember that.
You got to find, compromise in these things. The crime bill came up. That's a big discussion point today in the Democrat campaign, because it was a comprehensive crime bill. I voted for that crime bill. It put 100,000 new policemen on the street. It had wonderful things there on women's health care, including cancer screening for the first time and things that Medicare and Medicaid would cover, things like that. But it had something else in it. It outlawed, I think it was 16 different types of assault weapons. Wow, I'm from Southern Illinois. This is NRA country, man, But I had to weigh and balance these things, saying, well, there's more good in this than there is bad. Folks that show up at your town meetings, they're always riling against everything, And I say to them, well, you know what? I respect your issue. If I were just voting on your issue alone, I'd probably vote that way. But I didn't get that chance. There were 150 things in this bill, okay? And I can only weigh and balance. And if I think on balance is good for the country, I got to support it. Well, when I came home to try to explain my vote on the crime bill, I had a habit. I would go to every county and have a town meeting and explain it. My first meeting was in Johnson County at the American Legion, somewhere out west of Vienna. Eddie Quaglia and I go down there together. We top the hill. This is out in the country. And there's got to be 500 cars on both sides of the road. We couldn't park within a quarter mile of that building. These guys all had their Patriot hats on. I walk in this building, and they've got a big cutout space for me where I can stand up and try to explain my vote. but they're not listening to a thing I say. And every time I try to say something, they'll go, because I voted for the assault weapon ban, they would go, Benedict Arnold, traitor, you know. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. And then when I finished that meeting, it was like running the gauntlet because you got to walk out through these people. Oh, they were so mad. Drive over to Golconda, I'm topping one of those hills and looking through my rear view mirror. There must be 100 trucks following me to Golconda. And the same thing happened there. But that comes with the territory. But that was just one bill. The most difficult bill I had before me in Congress was the Clean Air Act. This was something that President Bush, who was a really good guy, felt strongly about. And it decimated our coal industry. I tried to, myself, guys from Kentucky, West Virginia, Southern Indiana, different coal country areas, we tried to get support for a modified bill that would put so much money into cleaning up the coal desulfurization. But we couldn't get any support. I went to the guys out west and I said, you know what? The Hoover Dam gives you more cheap electricity throughout the whole western states. And who paid for it? Guys in Illinois and Kentucky and taxpayers all over this country. You got cheap electricity because we all helped you. Went to the TVA guys in southeastern United States and said, who built Kentucky Lake and all the Tennessee Valley Authority? You got cheap electricity. We want to save coal miners' jobs. They too support this country. Do you think they would raise a finger to help us? Not at all. So we got the Clean Air Act. And the coming into compliance with that act was so devastating. It decimated the coal industry for so many years, and we fought so hard on that. I don't have time, but I'd love to talk to you about two bills that I introduced, the Wilderness Act and the Cache River Wetlands. That was a mighty struggle to get those passed, but we set aside in the Shawnee National Forest 40,000 acres of land that you can't ride ATVs in. You know, it's to be left alone so that our children can have something left to enjoy without it being overrun by everything. I'm going to skip ahead because I told Gordon I'd be through in 45 minutes. All right, let me tell you.
That never happens.
I'll tell you one more thing that I've just got a moment to tell. President Clinton asked me and 14 other congressmen to go to Bosnia to ascertain for our country what we should be doing in the Bosnian conflict. If you remember, the old Eastern European countries of Croatia and Serbia and Bosnia and so on were in a huge conflict. The president of Serbia, Milosevic, was committing genocide against anyone because Serbia was a Christian nation. They had decided for some reason to go into Bosnia and wipe out everybody that was of a Muslim religion. And so this was a big conflict for us. What were we to do about this? So with 14 other congressmen, we left Andrews Air Force Base one night about 7 o'clock and flew all the way to Serbia, to Belgrade. And we landed on an abandoned airstrip outside the city. Went in and spent a little while in a hotel. This place was, they were selling gasoline in cans along the roadway from the airstrip into Belgrade. Devastated economy. Anyway, we went to meet with Milosevic in his palace, with his army surrounding his palace. 15 of us sat there And he was sitting here, and we're sitting in a semicircle like this. And every single one of us looked him straight in the eye. And we said, Mr. President, if you don't stop your genocide in Bosnia, America is going to have to deal with you, and we will. Just like that. And I had to pinch myself because I said, now wait a minute, I'm sitting here in his palace with his army around us, but see, that's the moral authority that America has in the world. We can do that. If we don't face down injustice in the world, who's going to? Who's going to face Putin down if we don't stand up to him? Because he'll run over the Ukraine and everybody else that's within his reach. But we did it. And we got escorted out of there. And we got back on our plane. We flew to Croatia and met with President Tuđman that night and his people. And then the next morning we got up about 3 o'clock and we flew down to Sarajevo, Bosnia. This used to be the most beautiful little city in the world. Gorgeous. Had the Winter Olympics there just a few years before. We were in flak jackets. We land on the only airstrip that's open at the airport. A gigantic caterpillar meets us at the plane. We have to walk behind the blade of this caterpillar all the way to our security bus. And because there are mortar rounds that are coming in from the hillsides. So we get on the security bus and there's two sections. There's the Muslim section, there's a Christian section of the city and so on. Anyway, we had Muslim guards that were escorting us through the city. I'm sitting about halfway back on the bus. We keep imploring these guards because as we're traveling through the streets and all these burned out buildings and people are living in basements and turned over cars, rail cars and stuff, we kept seeing these people running out and they were doing this. They were clapping because they knew there were 15 American congressmen in town and we were going to have something to say about their lives and ending this war. So we kept imploring the guards, let us stop. We want to talk to these people, and they wouldn't do it. So we finally got to one section, and we were changed, the Muslim guards to the Christian guards, and we're what's left of downtown. We pull off in this square. The guards finally say, okay, we'll pull off here. But they're not going to talk to you yet. We pull off in this square, and I'm sitting about halfway back in the bus, and I'm looking out the side of the window, and there are hundreds of people streaming out from the alleys and the streets that come into this square. We have State Department interpreters with us, and there was no way to keep up with all the things that people were around us, pressing on us, trying to tell us. And there's one old guy. Somebody took a picture of him talking to me, and I got it at home. He grabbed me by the wrist. He had only a couple teeth left in his head. Gaunt, face drawn. He said to me, Congressman, he said, I'm the only person left in my family. He said, my wife is gone, my children are gone, my last remaining brother was killed in this square just a few weeks ago. And he said, I want you to know that we only trust America. We only trust America. That's what he said to me. We finally go over to meet with President Izetbegovic, complete our talks with him. We're flying up to Germany to meet with the troops. And I'm thinking about what this old man said to me. And here's what I know in my heart of hearts, and some things are just intuition. He wasn't talking to me about we only trust America's military might to save us, or we only trust America's economic strength to save us, or we only trust America's democratic institutions. That wasn't what he was talking about. Here's what he was talking about. What he was really saying to me was, Congressman, we only trust America's experience. Because what did he know about America? That in America, people came from every part of the world to the shores of this country. We came here with different ethnicities, different religions, different races. And somehow America has made it work. For 250 years we've chosen to live together. And here's a little country where if you're a neighbor to someone and you're a different ethnicity or a different religion, you're going to die over that. And he knew the story of America. That with all of our differences, somehow we've made it this far. And that light of America was what still shone in his heart, despite everything that he had lost. And I want to tell you, folks, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. We can choose to get along, or we can choose to divide. God help us if we choose the latter. I've been in countries that have been totalitarian governments, and I've been in countries that are totally laissez-faire, hands-off, people do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it. This is the only country in the world where order and responsibility and freedom all go together. Well, my dad used to say, boy, you went all the way around the barn. So, anyway, I only have 7 minutes for questions, but I'll stay as long as you want to have. There's so much more I would love to share with you. It was such an honor for me. Jimmy, you look just like Mimi.
Yeah, and you look just like Lynn. You were a common visitor
I
in my
was.
parents' home.
You bet.
My dad loved you like a son.
Yeah, I loved him.
And I've heard you speak many times, and you struck a chord about your father and to me with my father.
Yep.
We have something in common. I think I know why he loved you so much. I was wanting to be a pipe fitter. You wanted me to be a salesman.
Yeah.
But they were making $4.60 an hour, and I had to have that. They were going to go to $5.20 an hour. That was more money than the professors at SIU made in a year. So
It's still more than they make. If you're a good plumber.
I remember my cousin Tommy, who was business agent for 551, and my dad were teaching me measurements, mathematics, and finally I said, Dad, I said, you know, you're running the biggest job, and my cousin's a BA, why won't I get in? And he said, because they're going to take minorities, and there's families older than we are, and they're not going to take that many. He said, hey, what I want you to do, and this is what relates to you. They're going to ask you one question. I'm going to give you the correct answer. They're going to ask you, what is a union? And you say, a union is a group of people working together for the benefit of themselves as families and individuals through the art of compromise. And I lived by that all my life.
Yep.
And they took me. And I did not score the highest because they liked that answer.
You were talking about Kenneth Gray. Well, you know, Kenny still had his memory with him
Oh, yeah.
to the end, okay?
Yeah.
So I go over to a charity concert over there at the Herrin Civic Center,
Uh-huh.
and he waves me over and he said, Toady, this is Lawrence Walden's daughter. He said, Lawrence Walden was the best friend I ever had, her father. So, what is it, he likes to go to the giant flea market? And my grandson is a upcoming athletic star, my grandson Cole.
Good.
Cole
Good.
Sanders. He's a upcoming athletic star.
Okay, good. Any
And,
other questions while we've got a minute?
I introduced him to Kenneth Gray.
Yeah.
Kenny was really, said, you know, he was really glad to meet him.
Yeah.
And Cole always asked me, Grandma, why is everybody dying that you introduced me to?
You had a question,
Yeah,
dear?
Glenn, what was the name of that two-room grade school?
Herald School, Herald.
H-E-R-A-L-D, Carroll School, that's in White County?
It's in White County, it's where I grew up, in southeastern White County. They called us hill people.
And so you graduated from Carmine High
We
School?
went to Carmine High School.
Okay.
Yeah, we got on a bus at 6:30.
Uh-huh.
We lived 18 miles from our high school,
Right.
and it took a circuitous route all out through the country, and, you know, before we finally got to school.
Well, I was just gonna tell you, I went to Bandyville 8 years, and it was 2 rooms.
Oh, yeah?
Big room and the little room, 8
Yeah.
grades.
I
And
love that old two-room school.
I did the 5th and 6th grade together.
Yep,
So I
well, I
went to high
did
school,
too.
kind of like when you were, yeah.
I only had 2 grade school teachers.
I went to a two-room school in Colton. I couldn't spell my name. I was in the 3rd grade.
I have a question. I can't remember which bill you were talking about, but you were talking about, it had all these different aspects, and you were trying to weigh one side or the other. I understand when you're doing compromise, giving and taking. But what I don't understand is how people get away with, whoever the people are, tacking on the amendments that have nothing to do with the bill.
Right.
I mean, to me,
No,
you
it's,
can have an amendment that changes the bill a little bit
yeah.
for that focus.
Well, here's the thing.
You
That's
know,
why it's important for both parties to do everything they can to win the majority. Because the majority has the majority of people on each committee of their party. Okay, every committee. And the most important committee, one of the most, is the Rules Committee. Because they set the rules for debate on every bill. And if somebody wants to put an amendment on a bill, the Rules Committee has to rule whether that amendment is germane to the overall bill or not. And that's where politics gets played, okay? Because if you're not the party in power, the Rules Committee is probably going to rule your amendment non-germane. If you are the party in power, you're probably going to rule it germane to the bill, no matter how far-fetched it is.
So if there's a coal mining bill
Mm-hmm.
and somebody's talking about health care, I'm not saying pros or cons,
That's an easy.
they can still tack that part over here
Yeah,
onto
because
this other coal
when they
bill.
go before the Rules Committee to determine whether it's germane, they'll connect health care to mining. Okay, black lung and all kinds of things. So, you know, I know, but guys, let me say this. There are things that are detestable about the logistics and everything. I know there are political machinations that go on under the best circumstances, but this is the best system in the world. I mean, think of what we would have to have otherwise. A dictator sitting at the top with an army behind him, or complete disorder, you know? I mean, yes, it's messy and all this sort of thing. I listen to these candidates running for president right now, and most of my friends don't want to vote for any of them. You know? But this process is messy, but it's still the best process in the world, no matter who wins. You know, one of the most admired people I knew in Congress was Bob Michael, a Republican from Peoria. Just a wonderful man. I got pictures with my family and President George Bush, the first Bush. And they invited us into the White House, even invited my daughter up through their living quarters. You know, Mrs. Bush is the most wonderful person. We don't need to be at each other's throat because we differ politically or philosophically or ideologically. You know, there's good in both. Let's put it together and make it work for America.
Yes, well, our government is based on 3 powers, separate but equal. And
Yes,
it's always worked well.
yes,
Now you can be elected to or appointed to the Supreme Court for a lifetime. You
yes.
can be elected, you chose not to, but you can be elected to Congress for a lifetime if
Yeah.
they keep voting you in.
Yep,
However, recently, the president is only allowed, he's limited to 2.5 terms. So doesn't that disrupt the triumvirate of power? Where does the equal part come in?
Well, I don't know, Bob, but I think, you know, as much as my dad and mom loved Franklin Roosevelt, you know, they got a little bit tired of it all before the end. I don't think the American people will want to change that law. 2 terms and you're out of here, buddy.
2.5.
2.5, yeah, really, if you're appointed for a part of the term. But I don't know. It's never perfectly balanced, as you know. You know, never perfectly balanced. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was thinking about your decision on going ahead and voting like you said you
Yep.
would, which makes me think about through all my years that it got to the place where they'll say whatever you want to hear until they get in, and they'll do whatever they want to. So I admire you from the point of going ahead and doing what you said you would do, even though
Well,
you didn't feel right about it. And then I hear this all the time, if you can't beat them when you're a freshman in college, then you join them. And it seems like the government is getting so corrupt.
Well, I don't know. You know, the truth for me is, at least, 98% of the people I would say that I met in my political career are good, decent people on
Well,
both
you're
sides.
right.
But no, they're trying to make very difficult decisions.
Yeah.
None of these decisions are just black and white. They're very complex, and no matter how you vote, somebody's going to see it as a crooked vote if it's not the way they want it. And you really have to give these people some credit because they're trying to weigh and balance. You know, it's just like my dad and mom, they both worked on WPA. Daddy was a water boy down working in the Shawnee Forest and CCC camp. He only had one arm. My mother worked in a nursing home in Carmi, Illinois, scrubbing floors on her knees. That's how they raised their kids. They believed in everything that Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman said was true. It was true for my mom and dad. That old lady in Golconda on the bus, she believed in everything that Ike Eisenhower had to say, and everybody since then as a Republican. Well, that's fine. You know, I don't see anything wrong with that. It's just that you can't have it all one way or the other. You know, I saw the fault in some Democrat presidents very easily. I saw the fault in some Republican presidents. But I came to accept it as saying, you know what? It's a very imperfect government. It fails all the time, but it's better than anything else.
Well, I agree with that.
You know, that's, anyway, I'm sorry to take up, I'm past time. Okay, yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I should ask or not, but I would like for you to reflect on the current situation in that there seems to be a huge generational gap in this political season.
Well, there
How do you
is.
see that?
There is. My son and daughter are big Bernie Sanders fans, and I'm not. You know?
We know who hasn't paid for it.
They're young, right. I don't care, you know, in my way of thinking now, you know, you can try to powder puff it and call it democratic socialism, but it's really socialism. I don't care what moniker you put on it. So I'm not a fan of his. I served with him 10 years in the Congress. He never ran as a Democrat, but he would come to our caucus and he would rail against everything, you know. So I did not come to respect him in the way that maybe I should. But he's brought a lot of young people along because of the socialist bent. And that sounds good to people. Except I don't know how you run a democracy that way, myself. But on the Republican side, I've never seen anybody like Donald Trump either. You know, wow. I keep thinking, well, you got to start dealing with issues one of these days. You know, because you know when I was in Congress, we got to know the Bush family pretty well. And Jeb Bush was a very substantial candidate for the Republican Party. He had been an excellent governor of Florida. And yet, he was thrown out on his rear end before he even got started. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? You know?
$150 million started.
I know, but still, yeah, I like Jeb Bush. I mean, he was a good person. I don't know what's going on anymore in either party, but we'll survive it. I guarantee you that. Yes, ma'am.
Why do we have to be Democrats and Republicans? Why can't we vote for the right person?
Well, you can. You can. But the truth of the matter is, if you're on that ballot, under one party or the other, you're supposed to be subscribing to a certain philosophy or ideology that you're more consistent with than the people on the other side. So there are a lot of people who say, I'm voting for the candidate that represents my ideology no matter what. So the old lady on the bus in Golconda, that was her, okay? There are other people who say, no, I want the right to vote for the person, you know, but then that gets all mixed up too, because you might think you know somebody and you really don't. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think because of the two polls that are going on now, so terribly opposite, is this maybe a chance, not a chance, because I'm not encouraging it, but an opportunity when that third party does come to light?
Yep. I think there's a real possibility that a third party will come out of this election. I really do. Because I think there's going to be a substantial number of people on the Democrat side who are Bernie Sanders supporters who will not vote for Hillary Clinton. And I think there's going to be, if he wins a nomination, Donald Trump, I think there's going to be a substantial number of people on the Republican side that won't vote for him. And I do think that the discontent in both parties could easily give rise to a third party. I hope that doesn't happen, but it could. Young people, the millennials on down, people born since 1980, okay, on down, they don't want to hear anything about party politics. You know, they're just, talk to me about the issues, but I don't want, you know, I don't want to hear if you're a Democrat or a Republican.
Do you think this will be a more socialistic third party?
Yes, I do. I think it could be.
I hope not.
Well, I hope not too. I believe in democracy. And that's the broad middle ground, as I said before. That's not socialists out here and ultras out here.
I've heard lately a lot about Obama maybe declaring martial law because of all the disturbances and all of this and all of that. What is your take on that?
Well, I think martial law is only declared in a particular place if it's necessitated, like you know, large riots and things like that. That's not going to happen as a national policy. No, he's not going to do that. I mean, there are times when you have to bring the National Guard in for disasters and emergencies and riots and things like that, but we've done that forever, you know. Ma'am?
What about your take on the popular vote as opposed to the delegates? You know, electoral vote.
That's a tough one. It really is. Because without the Electoral College, the states with a small population don't really have much representation in that election. On the other hand, it just seems that as a national election, it ought to be the person that gets the most votes. But that hasn't always happened either, you know. I don't know. I'm back and forth on that issue. When I was in Congress, I had 600 and some odd thousand people in my district, and the whole state of Montana had about 500,000. So my little district here was with one congressman. Montana was, I was sitting in the lunchroom, the House dining, having lunch one day with the Pat Williams, who was a congressman from Montana, and I was griping about this district. I was having lunch with Pat and a couple other guys. I said, my gosh, my district's 240 miles long. Pat says, Glenn, listen to me. You can put the west end of my district on Chicago and the east end of my district on Washington, D.C. That's how big Montana is. And I'm the only guy there. So, you know, it's how you see representation. Folks, I've taken way too long. Thank you so much for that.